Welcome back. We're looking at the rise of international criminal courts and examining their effectiveness in bringing to justice government leaders who've been accused of committing serious crimes in office. Joining me are Caitlin Reiger, co-author of the book Prosecuting Heads of State with the International Center for Transitional Justice. Lisa LaPlante, founder and director of FujimoriOnTrial.org, who's worked with the Peru's Truth and Reconciliation Commission for many years, and Colin Thomas-Jensen, a policy analyst and Africa specialist with the Enough Project, a Washington-based non-profit dedicated to ending genocide around the world. As we get back to our discussion, perhaps, Caitlin Reiger, I could put to you the question from Mohammed that came from South Africa by phone just before the break. Mohammed was asking about the situation with Israel, and of course that's one that's raised a lot by viewers around the world.
I think one of the challenges with international justice options is that they're not connected to any state machinery. They don't have their own police force, and whether that applies to international criminal courts, but also international justice processes like the International Court of Justice, which has made rulings against Israel in the past. But it's a matter of finding somebody who can enforce that. You know, I think the pressure still needs to apply to domestic processes, that each state has the obligation to ensure that its own practices are in compliance with international law, and then it comes down to a matter of political pressure to back that up.
Well, let's get from Germany on the phone. We've got Alfred on the line. Alfred, what would you like to ask? Thanks for your patience.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Raj. My question is, why is we are all seeking justice and peace. Why is Charles Taylor sitting there trying to dodge the charges that have been imposed on him, while he caused so many atrocities in Sierra Leone?
Actually, Colin, well, let me give this to Colin, actually, because he's our expert, Africa expert here, and I guess the Charles Taylor case was going for a long time. There was an effort for a long time, and now, of course, he's there indicted.
Yeah.
What's the expectation from that?
Well, I think the trial's just getting underway, and we also have one of our other guests was formerly in that special court for Sierra Leone, so she might be better placed to answer specifics on it. But I think what we're seeing right now is Charles Taylor, as Milosevic did, using the witness box as a pulpit in which to blame others for everything that's gone wrong and everything that I think overwhelming evidence suggests that he was responsible for.
Actually, Colin, a question that came from Live Station, our chat room, touches on an issue that some people bring up, and I might put it to you while we're on this subject. Sure. Rich in the UK wrote in through the Live Station chat room saying, is the ICC's location in Europe, i.e. the West, the reason why leaders from other continents such as Sudanese President al-Bashir don't take it so seriously and ignore its authority? Would regional courts be more effective than one supreme ICC at The Hague?
I think there's a case to be made that the fact that the ICC in Europe does present it as, in a sense, white man's justice, and that's a phrase you often hear associated with the court. But realistically, with Sudan, President Bashir is going to ignore an arrest warrant from any international tribunal, wherever it is. This is a government that simply denies that crimes were committed in Darfur, and in fact accuses the rebels of killing more government soldiers than they killed civilians. So I think the ICC, the case with Bashir is more a case of simply evading justice rather than evading the ICC.
We've got a lot of viewers wanting to take part. I've got on the line from the UK, Adi, with a question. Adi, what would you like to add?
My question is, I just want to ask, the international community, what justice are they going to do to the issue, to the wrongful invasion of Iraq?
Okay, let me get a perspective. So we're looking at it from an international law perspective. Lisa LaPlante, maybe let me get your perspective on this. A lot of people discuss this, that the US went into Iraq. There was the whole issue of how Saddam Hussein was dealt with. Getting your perspective, knowing sort of touching on international justice, how do you gauge an action like the US took, and what implications there could be if it's ever something that's discussed at an international legal level?
I think the issue with Iraq is that ultimately they took upon the task of trying Hussein within their own legal system, which was encouraged because ultimately the duty to prosecute belongs with the state. And in that sense, there was not too much that the U.S. could do other than to defer to that. In terms of the U.S. involvement, that would involve, I suppose, the crimes that were committed by U.S. troops or in any way that type of situation. So again, as was already commented, that depends on domestic jurisdiction and the types of penal codes that would be applicable to that case.
Looking at the US's role, let me get a question to Caitlin here that came in from the live station chat room as well. Lunuts in the UK has written something, and this is a very interesting subject. If the US has made the Hague Invasion Act to make sure American war criminals are never taken to an international court, how can the US be trusted in this matter? And this is referring to the American Service Members Protection Act of 2002.
I think the US was definitely, by its acts of trying to protect its people from coming under the jurisdiction of the ICC, doing a great harm to the building of the system that the ICC was designed to protect. We've definitely seen a shift in that policy even before the end of the Bush administration. The US government is no longer pursuing that kind of aggressive challenge to the ICC, and in fact did not block the Security Council referral of the situation in Darfur to the ICC. So I think that is starting to change. Ultimately, as we've said time and again already today, ultimately these are obligations on states though, and so yeah.
It'll pretty much rest there first, I guess. Well, we've got on the line from the UK, Raj.
Yeah, hi.
Hi.
Hi, good evening, Sean. Just want to ask you about this Sri Lankan genocide or so-called what's happened over there, and in the perspective of the international law. So far, nothing has happened, and what's the panel think of this?
Let me give this to Lisa LaPlante and ask about if you followed the situation in Sri Lanka in any way. The concept of well, the other issue, I guess, of everyone being stretched so thin when we've got so many potential cases to deal with. Is it something that can be handled easily, or again, does it come down to, as Colin was saying, I think Caitlin too, that it's a question of having the states having to deal with this first, and then using the ICC as a court of last resort?
One of the underlying principles of both human rights law and international criminal law is the idea of complementarity, which essentially domestic courts need to be exhausted before there's any recourse to the international system. And the theory behind that is you ultimately want the states to be able to handle their own criminal justice processes. So there will always be that deference to the national processes. The international and the hybrid courts are an effort to address when the national courts are not in a position to handle that type of case, and also when there's great political division within the population that could tend towards reigniting conflict.
A question from Germany. Let's squeeze this in if we can from Jello on the phone. Go ahead.
Yeah, Riz Khan, good evening.
Hi, good evening, go ahead.
Riz Khan, who will be the first Western leader to be tried? While the developing countries are always betrayed, and the crime throughout the whole world, most of them are caused by the Western world.
Okay. Jello, because we have very little time, let me give this to Caitlin Riger and ask, Colin answered this to some degree. You know, we talked about the two-tier system at the beginning, but let me get your perspective on this. The idea of who might be the first Western leader to actually have to appear in court. It's a bit of a tough question for you, but I'm sorry.
Well, I think ultimately that's going to depend on where crimes are committed and what court can have jurisdiction. But I think it's misleading to see these courts as pursuing only countries from the less developed world, and that, for example, that the ICC is functioning as an anti-African court. If the ICC only focused on countries outside of Africa, I think we would very legitimately hear criticisms of the court for ignoring the plight of African victims suffering in regimes that are abusing their human rights. So I think it's not quite an accurate way to look at the situation.
Well, Caitlin, I want to thank you very much. Lisa LaPlante as well, and Colin, thank you for being here as well too.
Thanks.
Thank you all. And thank you for being with us with your questions. On the next show, how effectively is President Obama managing global challenges? We get an assessment from former US Secretary of State Madeleine Albright and the former National Security Advisor Sandy Berger. Don't forget, you can call me and get updates on the shows via Twitter, and you can also tweet us your questions and comments. Check out our Facebook page as well. We take questions from there, and of course, we'll always welcome you to call in when we get on those subjects. A couple of top guests tomorrow, join me for that, but from me and the team for now, we'll see you next time.